Hello and welcome. I'm Vincent McCory and this is Africa 54. Tonight, the report card is out. Somalia, North Korea and Afghanistan are the most corrupt states in the world. In conflict-ridden countries like Syria, reports of high levels of bribery and abuse of power. That's according to the latest index compiled by the Berlin-based group Transparency International. But here is a bit of good news. There is a strong progress in some African countries. From London, VOA's Henry Ridgewell has more.
The capital of Liberia. It's a country that a decade ago was racked by civil war, but where the economy is booming. GDP grew more than 10% in 2012. Liberia came in 83rd out of 177 countries in Transparency International's 2013 Corruption Perceptions Index. That's good compared to much of Africa, but some analysts say corruption is still holding the country back.
When the traffic finally moved forward, OPA drove right to the police officer at the junction.
Robtel Paley is a Liberian national and scholar at London University's School of Oriental and African Studies. She wrote a children's book about corruption and says younger generations must be made aware.
In the private sector, it happens in the markets, it happens in the schools, it happens in governments. So I would argue certainly that it's entrenched, and I think this is a common phenomenon that people will accept as being entrenched. So it's an open secret that corruption is entrenched in Liberia.
Paley says cutting corruption requires a change in mindset.
I think in many ways, Liberians think of corruption as about a way to get ahead of the system, a way to bypass the system. But you'll find that people are talking about the issue of corruption now more than ever before.
Somalia came in at the bottom of the index among countries that are the most corrupt. On Monday, lawmakers in the capital, Mogadishu, voted to oust the government after a power struggle over allegations of favoritism and clan politics. Countries suffering from conflict are the worst performers, says Robert Barrington, Executive Director of Transparency International.
You find a closing down of the transparency in government, and in particular you find a complete lack of accountability. The institutions of the state start to dissolve, and it's the citizens that suffer.
Syria, with a protracted civil war, has slipped further down the corruption index. It now lies 10th from the bottom. Iraq, currently witnessing a surge in violence, is also among the bottom 10, as is Afghanistan. Ukraine ranks 144th, one of the worst in its region, which included Europe, Russia and most of the former Soviet states. Again, Robert Barrington.
In most countries, you would hope that when you go to the police, they're your allies in the fight against crime. But in many countries, you actually find they're your enemies in the fight against crime. They are themselves the criminals.
But there are positive stories too.
Rwanda, a particularly interesting one, because it did perform quite poorly for a number of years, but there's been a concerted government effort to tackle corruption, and that's now reaping rewards.
The best performers in the index were New Zealand and Denmark, with Scandinavian countries consistently among the least corrupt. The United States came in 19th. Henry Ridgewell for VOA News, London.
Well, for more perspective, I'm joined via Skype from Berlin, Germany by Marie-Ange Kalenga, Regional Coordinator for West Africa, Transparency International. Ms. Kalenga, welcome to Africa 54.
Thank you.
Yes, now we want to focus on African nations here. We mentioned that African nations have been doing quite well in the area of corruption. Mention to us which are some of these countries and what are they doing right?
Okay, well, the best performer this year are Botswana, Cape Verde, Seychelles, and Rwanda. I mean, for Botswana and Cape Verde, it's clear that, these are two countries with vibrant democracies that have invested heavily in people and in human capital and are seeing the fruits of that strategy. In the case of the worst performers, such as Somalia and South Sudan, I mean, it's clear that these countries have been torn by civil conflicts, political instability, and even chaos for a while. So it's very hard for them to build a strong and functioning institution that can basically tackle corruption effectively and provide citizens with the services that they need.
So you can say that actually there's a direct correlation between how democratic a country is, how well the institutions are developed, and the level of corruption.
Well, absolutely, because in democratic nations, there is a greater openness, accountability, and transparency, but also greater trust from the citizens towards their government. In democracy, citizens can hold their political leaders to account for the way they are managing public resources. And this is not possible, for instance, in repressive and closed countries.
Well, thank you very much for joining us today, Ms. Marie-Ange Kalenga from Berlin.
Thank you.
Yes, that's Marie-Ange Kalenga is the regional coordinator for the West African region, Transparency International. She joined us from Berlin, Germany. Now.